You're listening to the Create a Life That Is Beautiful podcast. I'm your host, Letitia Ringe, and this is episode number 41. Welcome to the Create a Life That Is Beautiful podcast. I am your host, Letitia Ringe, and this podcast is designed to inspire, empower, and support you on the journey of uncovering your truth and purpose in the world. Welcome, beautiful. Thank you so much for joining. If you're new, thank you. A big welcome. And for everybody else, I hope that you have been having a beautiful week and that you enjoyed our last episode, which was all about what purpose means to me today. And as I mentioned in that episode, it has evolved quite a bit since the beginning of this podcast. And that's exactly what I would expect with a topic like purpose. So I hope you enjoyed that. Now, one of the main things that I've discovered is that purpose is something we discover through our heart, not our mind. It's feeling-based, it's present moment focused, it's ever evolving. For many people, it's simply about your own self-discovery. It's the thing that everybody wants though. We want to feel a sense of purpose in our life. And it's very much centered in feminine energy, which is why my course, Embrace Your Feminine Essence, is so useful when it comes to aligning with our purpose. But we also need to be able to bring our purpose to life. And for that, we must use our masculine energy, our action. We also need to use our feminine energy as well, but this is where our masculine energy comes into play very significantly. So, for all of us, I truly believe that we already know the answers. They're already inside of us. And it's about connecting back to our heart and learning how to listen and receive the guidance and trust it, all of which are feminine energy, that allows us to align with it. But then it is the showing up for our purpose that can be the most difficult part. So today's episode, I'm going to be walking you through what is the zone of genius. Now, this is a topic that we hear all the time, and I'm sure you've probably heard it before. It's a term coined by Gay Hendricks in his very popular personal development book called The Big Leap. So I'm going to be walking you through what the zone of genius is. Now, this is also something that is really important for both discovering your purpose and showing up for your purpose, which I'll explain in just a moment. But what I want to mention right here is that this is a topic that we will also be diving into during my 5-day Find Your Purpose challenge, which begins today over in my private Facebook group, the Make a Difference Soul Tribe. So you can join the group and register for the training still so that you get the full details and replay. All you need to do is head over to letitiaringe.com/purpose. And you can sign up there and you will have access to all of these. So in today's episode, I want to explore with you what the zone of genius is and why it's important. So to get started, understanding our zone of genius, as I just mentioned, helps us to uncover our purpose and show up for it in the most effective way. And when I talk about effective, I'm talking about effective as in the way it impacts our energy and also our potential. So if you don't know what your purpose is, understanding your zone of genius will help you uncover it. And if you feel like you are on track when it comes to your purpose, understanding your zone of genius will help you show up for it in the most effective way. So we can use our mind to try and work everything out, but by looking outward first. This is what we usually do. We look outside ourselves for the answers. So for instance, if I'm interested in helping people with a particular problem because I see there is a need for a solution there, then what I might do is try to use my mind to predict what it is that best needs to be done in that area. And then I will shove myself into this little mold that I've created and try to fit within that mold. So we're using the mind to figure out what the problem is and to provide a solution on how. Now, where this trips people up is that the way that they decide they need to show up for the purpose or the area that they're interested in might not actually be within their zone of genius. It might not be within the way that they can actually add the most value to. And so when we go about the problems that we look at that we think need solving in a particular way, this disconnects us from our heart and means that we ultimately might start and might be okay at whatever it is we're trying to achieve, but we ultimately end up unsatisfied because it's not truly within our zone of genius. So what is the zone of genius? Well, as I mentioned, it's a term that was coined by Gay Hendricks in his book, The Big Leap. And this book talks about the way we sabotage ourselves to keep us within our internal upper limit. Now, I've already spoken on this topic in episode number 13 on the podcast. So you can also find that at leticiaringe.com/upper limit problem. And that will give you a great description of what the upper limit problem is and how it appears in our day-to-day life. Now, the other tool that Gay gives us in his book, The Big Leap, is the zone of genius. So Gay describes that there are 4 levels with which people operate in. The first is our zone of incompetence. So this is where we are doing things or showing up in a way where we are not skilled in that particular area or we don't actually understand it. So this is why it's called our zone of incompetence, because we aren't competent in the area that we're operating in. And I'm going to use the word operating rather than working because I want to think of this as we can embody our zone of genius in all aspects of our life, not just work. So the second aspect is a zone of comfort. The zone of comfort is where, this is where you're efficient at whatever it is you're doing. It feels comfortable, which is why it's called the zone of comfort. But you also recognize that there are just as many other people who can also work within this area and are actually probably much better at it than you. And actually, that is the most likely result if you are operating within your zone of comfort. It's very comfortable. It doesn't get you out of that comfort zone. Just think that. So, you're not feeling satisfied at all. Just like if you're in your zone of incompetence, you're not going to be feeling that satisfaction either because you aren't competent in the area. So you're not able to operate in an effective way. And you also don't understand what you're doing. I don't think anyone would feel satisfied in that. Now, the next zone is our zone of excellence. And this is where Gay says most people who build their life and career are operating. So this is where we will be very skilled. So we have these, skills that we've perhaps practiced and cultivated over a long time. Now, the difficulty with this area, the reason that it's not as satisfying as our zone of genius, which I will be talking you through next, is that either this isn't an area that energizes us, so we might actually find it quite draining. We might also be realizing that we still have to work hard to actually cultivate it. This is why it is something where we may be very skilled at it, but it's something that we've become skilled at because we've practiced and cultivated it over time. So we've had to work quite hard. And actually, as I speak about this, I just think that for most of us with our hustle and strive mentality, this is probably where we're at. And this is definitely where I was operating in. So of course you can do it, you can work hard at whatever it is and be okay or actually be very good at it, which if you are familiar with my story, you know that this was my problem. I just followed what I was good at. But this wasn't enough because while you might be good at it and you might be excellent at whatever it is you're doing, it might not actually be what lights you up. It might be unsatisfying and it might be draining and it's not the best use of you. So I think that this is where many people who are feeling fed up when it comes to purpose will be operating in. It will be either their zone of comfort or their zone of excellence, and perhaps for some of us, our zone of incompetence. Now, the zone of excellence, though, is the most confusing because it is the closest to the zone of genius, so it can be difficult for people to realize or to let go of that zone of excellence because it is something that they are very skilled at and that they've usually practiced and cultivated over a long period of time. So for me, this might have been my 8 years in a law firm and everything I had worked at really hard to be good at and to cultivate the skills that I had learned. Now, the next level is our zone of genius, and this is where basically you want to be at, especially when it comes to our purpose. So in this zone of genius, this is where it will be very natural for you. So you're using your natural abilities, your natural gifts, and it's where your interests and your gifts and your skills intersect. So it's a unique combination. Now, when you hear me talk about purpose, I usually say I believe that everybody has a unique combination of interests, gifts, skills that together combined lead you to living in alignment with your purpose. And this is very complementary for this concept of the zone of genius. Now, other characteristics of the zone of genius include that perhaps you might be able to you feel like you can do whatever it is better than almost anyone. Now, this might not be actually an area that you recognize that you are able to do it so almost effortlessly or so much easier than other people. And this is why I like to use the word gifts, because it's about what comes natural to you. So this might be things that others compliment you on all the time that you get noticed for and you think, really? Is that really such an amazing skill that I have? So if this is you and you notice people complimenting you on things where you're often thinking that, it's time to take note of what those are. And if you can't remember what those compliments might have been, start to pay attention when people compliment you. It can be one of the most useful places to find what those gifts are by asking the people around us in our life what they say would be your natural gifts. Where do they think that you are, what are the things that come naturally to you? Now, another aspect of being within the zone of genius is that you will be in a flow state. Now, flow state is something we explore in my online program, Embrace Your Feminine Essence, which if you're interested in learning more about these feminine energy characteristics, I highly recommend you check it out. It's a self-study course, so you can sign up at any moment and you will have access to all of the course materials. And you can sign up over at leticiaringe.com/EYFE, which stands for Embrace Your Feminine Essence. Now, the flow state, as you're working or operating, living within the zone of genius, you will be engaged in a flow state, which means that time just passes you by and you barely notice. You're so engaged in whatever you are doing. It energizes you rather than drains you. So compare this to hustling and striving, or maybe looking at this within the zone of excellence. We might be working really, really hard to perfect something, to be really, really good at it, and we will find it drains us. After doing it, we might feel proud because we've done it, we've ticked it off our to-do list, but it doesn't energize us. So this is why I say it's always important to go back to your energy. How is this affecting my energy? Is it energizing me or draining me? I would argue that for most people, and for some it's more important than others, we want to be looking at what drains us and what doesn't, because that will be an indication of where we are and aren't living in alignment with our purpose. Now, just with a disclaimer there, because some of us will be more drained by certain activities and also being around people than others. So for instance, if we talk about someone who's very introverted or considers them to be very introverted, then they will feel more drained by being around other people. So you need to factor that in as well. That doesn't mean they don't enjoy being around people. It just might mean that the way that you are around people, or the duration, needs to change, or perhaps you don't see people in, huge group environments. You meet with people one-to-one. So you wouldn't say that, oh, well, that means that I just can't be around people because I'm introverted, it drains my energy, and that can't be my zone of genius. You might actually be really amazing at connecting with people and actually find that if you make little adjustments like meeting with people one-to-one or in smaller groups and for shorter periods of time, that you actually are within your zone of genius. So don't rule it out just because of feeling drained, because it might have something else to do with it. And if you look at it from a human design perspective, people who are the reflectors and the projectors, they will often feel like their energy isn't generated from within them, so they will feel drained by other people and need time out. This is a completely normal thing, and so I think I just need to mention that disclaimer right here. Okay, so you're in this flow state. Time passes by whenever you're engaged in whatever it is that you're doing when you're in this state, and you feel energized while working, while doing, and you leave feeling energized. This is your flow state. So if you start to notice when you're in a state like this, when you feel like you're in your flow, take note of what you're doing. This will help you find your zone of genius. The other aspect of your zone of genius is that this is an area that you excel. So you'll often find that you're better at it than almost anyone. And this is why it's a natural gift, and that you might be complimented. You might stand out in this area. You excel. It's an area where you excel and it just feels so natural and you are in your flow state. Now, what this does is it also means that you will be inspired. So you'll be very receptive to receiving ideas, which means that you will be in a great space for creating and innovating. Now, creativity is another aspect of feminine energy, and I believe it is very important for us when it comes to innovation. Now, innovation isn't about being original or being new, as in nobody's ever done it before. It is, however, about new ideas, new ways of doing things. It's about progress, flexibility. It's innovation. We are finding new ways to look at problems we have and find new solutions. So we can improve things through innovation, and that is how we improve things. That's how we all evolve. So when we're in our zone of genius, we will be in this space where we will have high creativity, a high ability to create and to innovate. And this is because we're in a very good balance with our masculine and feminine energy. So again, if this is an area that you really want to dive deeper into, I recommend and invite that you check out Embrace Your Feminine Essence, because we do dive into these areas deeply, and it will help you so much in understanding these concepts in an even deeper way. So it also feels like what we're doing is almost effortless. And it's also where we will find that we will have our maximum results. And this is because we look at the energy that we're putting in and using up against the results that we are achieving. So our output becomes much more significant. So Gay says we want to be within our zone of genius 90% of the time. And I've listened to many interviews with him about the zone of genius, and he usually says that for someone trying to cultivate their zone of genius, to simply start off within it 10 minutes a day to start to get used to working within this space. But ultimately, it's where we want to be 90% of the time. And why is this? Well, because this is where we're in this flow state. We're our most creative and innovative. We're using our natural gifts. We feel our most inspired and satisfied. We're getting the maximum result based on the time and energy we're using and the output we're achieving. It's where we're able to contribute at our best because we're able to do it better than almost anyone. And so because of all of that, this is where we are most likely to have the most abundance from whatever we are doing. Now, I want to just now talk about this, giving you some more practical examples. So when people start off in a business or start off creating their business, what you'll find is that you want to do everything yourself. So I use the example of a business because it's something that I personally have experience in, but also it's something that most people can relate to and understand the amount of different skills that are involved in creating a business. So you've got to set up your website, you've got to be all over the technical side of everything, you've got to be good at marketing and sharing your message, you've got to be good at actually creating the products and service that you're creating, you've got to be great at speaking to people because that's involved in marketing. So there's all these different skill sets involved in running a business. Now, does this mean that the business itself is within your zone of genius? Very unlikely that everything that goes into running a business will fall within your zone of genius. There will be aspects potentially of and hopefully of what you are doing in your business that will be within your zone of genius, but it won't be everything. So what most people do is they start off with their business and they do absolutely everything, and usually because they're trying to make it profitable in the beginning, and also because they want to learn all of the skills and what's involved so that they can then go and potentially bring people on board to help them in that. And this is a good way to do it. What other people will do is keep trying to do everything themselves because they can do it. So you realize that, oh, I can create a website, I can, create a podcast, I can coach, I can create products and programs, I can market and do everything myself. But does this necessarily mean that this is where you are actually the best at? Are there other people out there who could do a much better job? Probably with most of that. And also, are you feeling energized by every single thing you're doing within this? Probably not. So there will be aspects of the business, of what's required for the business, that you're not the best at, that you can do, and that also drain you and you don't feel like you're in your flow state when you're doing them. Now, this can be difficult for people, and this is something that I've struggled even with as a lawyer, spreading myself too thin by not wanting to give up anything. It's this control thing, not wanting to admit that someone else could do it better perhaps, or simply just finding it difficult to relinquish control. But as I said in our last episode, when we relinquish control, we gain control. And this is paradoxical thinking. This is a really big concept in feminine energy and something we explore in Embrace Your Feminine Essence. So we have to be able to let go, to give up, to allow, to trust, to surrender, and sometimes this means to other people as well, in order to get the best results for our business or for whatever it is that we're working on. And this will often require us to delegate components of our business to other people. And you'll find that you benefit by doing that, but often we will wait until we are earning a specific amount of money and then we end up really disliking whatever it is we're doing rather than delegating these aspects as soon as possible. So in the business, perhaps where your zone of genius is, and let's talk about it in terms of, say, a life coaching business, because this is what I do. I'm a life coach, and I know many of you who listen to this podcast are also people who are either life coaches, are aspiring life coaches, or are doing something that is very similar to coaching. So perhaps my zone of genius is when I'm one-to-one coaching and on specific topics as well. Or perhaps it is when I run events. So if I try to spend, some of my time within that zone of genius, but then I'm also the 100% of time that I have, I've got 50% of that time, 60% of that time, 20% of that time even doing other activities that I don't actually enjoy, that don't satisfy me, that drain me, and that I'm not the best at, then this is where you're missing out on what you could be creating if you used or were in your zone of genius 90% of the time. So what many people do is figure out where their zone of genius is and start to let go of everything else. They focus specifically on this one aspect of their business or their work or their life where they get a lot of joy, a lot of satisfaction, a lot of flow from, and where they're able to create and innovate and produce in their best. They try to focus in on that as much as possible. Now, as I talk about this, probably is making a lot of sense to you. Even logically, it makes so much sense that wherever we're doing the best, we're feeling the best, and we're giving the best service or product or whatever it is to other people, that this would be where we should spend the bulk of our time. But it's this part about that it energizes us that I think people are missing. And this is why from the beginning of this podcast, I have said that to create a life that is beautiful, we want to be creating a life that we love, enjoy, and are inspired by. And this includes our work. This is where we want to be rolling. Because where we are inspired is where we are energized. Now, we can work out our zone of genius when we reflect on what might have also linked all of the different roles we've held in our life together to date. So you'll start to notice patterns. So you can start to reflect on your life to date, where you've noticed these flow experiences, where you've noticed you felt most energized, where you get complimented on by others, what you regard as your natural gifts, and you'll start to notice patterns potentially. And you'll start to realize that they actually are something that you've brought into whatever role you've actually taken up throughout your life. For others, you might not be able to find your zone of genius by reflecting on what's happened to date in your life. It might be more of a matter of self-discovery and actually trying to follow the little breadcrumbs, so maybe the little trail of curiosities that bring you to your zone of genius. Perhaps you felt like you haven't ever been in that flow state before. So it's a matter of getting you there as close as possible. And again, you can still reflect on what's worked for you to date and what hasn't, where you've found joy and where you haven't, and that will bring you closer to where your zone of genius is. Now, in an interview I watched with Oprah, she mentioned about when it comes to fulfilling our purpose, everybody needs a platform that suits their personality. And I think that when we think of the zone of genius, this can be really helpful as well. So we all have a different personality, and we can use Myers-Briggs and whatever other personality tool we want to figure out what our personality is, but ultimately we need to look within, and we'll find that different platforms are suitable for different people. This is where you feel in your element. For Oprah, it's on stage in a talk show as a talk show host. For other people, it will be one-to-one with clients. For others, it's going to be writing, it's going to be painting, it's going to be perhaps training people. Like, there are so many different platforms that we can use, and we can also think of it in terms of, social media. Like, what do you like using? Where do you feel like it's energizing you? So we all have a different platform that suits us. And our zone of genius can help us discover what that platform is. Our zone of genius can also help us discover what our purpose and interests are, because we can look at where we're most energized and then use that to figure out what causes we're interested in. The problems lie where we're in an area that we might actually genuinely love. We might work within it. We might have a business in it, but we're just doing the wrong thing. And we've got to let go of something, or we've just got to shift our focus. So this is all about feminine energy. Again, if you want to explore this topic some more, I invite you to check out Embrace Your Feminine Essence, my online course. You can go to www.letitiaringe.com/EYFE. But what I'm going to be sharing with you right now that's even more important is that I will be giving you a tool for locating your zone of genius in my 5-day free purpose training that's happening right now. It began on Monday, the 12th of November, and you can still sign up for it. You need to go to letitiaringe.com/purpose. The training is happening live for 5 consecutive days from Monday the 12th of November to Friday the 16th of November. There's an opportunity to receive Q&A and coaching with me, which will be really, really helpful when you're thinking, well, is it this? Is it this? So you'll be able to have the opportunity to do that on the call with me if you attend live, and then also to ask me as a question if you can't attend live, but making sure that you are able to do it within, a couple of days of the challenge happening. And an incentive to be doing the challenge as we're doing it is that there is 2 giveaways happening throughout the challenge for those who are connecting and participating while the challenge is happening. So there's a daily challenge each day for you to take part in, and those who take part in the most actively will go into a draw to win 2 giveaway prizes, one of which is a one-to-one session with me to help you find and show up for your purpose. So it's more of a strategy session. And the second one is something that I'll be revealing within the training itself, which will be very valuable to you as well. So, questions until our next episode for you to consider are: when do you feel most energized? When do you find yourself in a flow state? What do others compliment you on? What do you regard as your natural gifts? Now come and join us for the 5-day free purpose training at letitiaringe.com/purpose. And if you're listening to this episode much later on, I invite you to join our Make a Difference Soul Tribe. You can go to letitiaringe.com/make a difference. This is where I hold my free trainings all about finding and showing up for your purpose. And you'll also get a community of like-hearted people who are also dedicated to making a meaningful, heart-centered difference in the world and showing up for their beautiful purpose. Come and join us. We would love to have you. Okay, everyone, that is it. That is more about what the Zone of Genius is and some questions to help get you started. If you want to really take a deep dive into this right now, join us in the free purpose training, and I can't wait to see you there. Otherwise, until next week, I hope you have a beautiful week ahead, and I will see you next week for another episode to help you unlock your truth and purpose. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to the Create a Life That Is Beautiful podcast. If you feel called, I would love it if you could please take a minute to rate and review this podcast on iTunes. This helps other people like you find it, and I also invite you to take a moment to share this episode with a friend you know needs to hear it.